Patricia, thank you very much. It's a special treat to be introduced by a longtime friend and a person who I've respected for so many years. As a professional woman, as a board member of national corporations, as a civic leader nationally, including nonprofit organizations such as this, she's given something like 15 years to this board, but also served other national organizations such as chairperson of the Girl Scouts, for example. So she's a really accomplished leader, and I'd ask you just once again to ask her to thank you for her civic service to the country. And I also want to express my respect for the other honorees this evening, Michael Badakin, Tom Amdur, Monica Mitchell, Michael Novogradic, and Maria Torres Springer, all of whom we have observed their work, respected their work over the years, massive accomplishments that have touched many, many lives. And again, I'd like to ask you to join me once again in saying thank you and congratulations and respect to those persons. Dick Burns, thank you for your leadership. Chair Ralph Boyd, thank you. And if I may take one moment of personal privilege, I want to single out a person who's in the audience whose work I've admired for a lot of years. He grew up in the housing business, the traditional market-oriented housing business in New York, and then his life took a different turn as he really dedicated himself to creative, pioneering, nonprofit work. And that is Jonathan Rose, who's on the panel earlier, and I know is in the audience somewhere. Would you stand up and let us recognize you? Jonathan taught me over the years about a dimension of housing which I'd never really thought about in my own work, which was housing as a transcendent kind of institution. Home, if you will, as a transcendent place. Because yes, home is shelter, but it's a lot more than four walls and a roof, a dry place, a place to be safe when darkness comes. And it's a lot more than an economic transaction, although it's a major economic decision for every family. But when you break it down to its essence, home makes it possible for people to live their lives. The essential dramas of life, if you will, play out in these places we call home. Whether it's a single-family detached home, whether it's a multifamily apartment, whatever the form it might take, it's a place that we keep our possessions, which doesn't sound like a lot until you see an elderly woman walking down the street with a grocery basket with all of her possessions going down the street. And you think, how do people organize their lives, keep their medicines, keep the food that they will need for the next meal? We do that in these places we call home, that are safe and secure. It's a place where people gather for happy occasions like bringing a baby home from the hospital, just born, or a family birthday or a Mother's Day celebration, and sad events like a family that gathers for a wake and remembers the wonderful things about the person who has passed. It's a place where we nurture our children, sit around the family table and discuss everything from tomorrow's homework to the hoped-for vacation of the summertime. It's a place where people pray and share their deepest sense of their fears, their hopes, their ambitions with their Creator in the safe walls of home. And it's very often a place where people heal, whether it's something as simple as recovering from a minor cold or having to undergo a more extensive therapy as might be associated with cancer, for example. And all of this sense of what a home is has been hammered home to me on a number of different occasions. One occasion, it had to do with an earthquake, the Northridge earthquake in Los Angeles, where the president asked us to fly out that day because The roads were impassable, and the Secretary of Transportation needed to be there, and the head of FEMA, Federal Emergency Management, and I was asked to go because the estimate was there were 30,000 people out of their homes. It was Martin Luther King Day, January 17th, 1994, and we flew from Washington and were in Los Angeles by midday and found people in parks, in school gymnasiums, but they couldn't go back into their homes because the authorities were afraid that the next aftershock would bring down the houses and hurt or kill more people. So the immediate job was to how do you find some kind of shelter for 30,000 people between 4:34 in the morning when the earthquake occurred and darkness and rain and cold coming that evening. And it drove home for me over the course of the next month that I was there just what exactly a home means. It's very clear to me there is a connection between home and health. So the work that was done this afternoon focusing on that issue and the work that National NHP is doing in that respect is important. And again, little facts from my own experience draw it home. We know that a person living with AIDS can now live almost indefinitely with the right cocktail of medicines. But the estimated lifespan of a person with AIDS on the street without a home is 6 months. So that's just a graphic, sort of dramatic instance, but there's so many other evidences of the peace of mind that comes with having a safe place, the fact that older people want to stay in their own home for as long as they can, and it has a lot to do with their sense of their own health. So as a country, we need to focus on housing. We have a housing shortfall in America, or we wouldn't have the dimensions of unaffordability that we do. There's not one single metropolitan area in the United States, not one, where a person earning the minimum wage can afford the fair market rent on a 2-bedroom apartment. It doesn't exist. So people end up in overcrowded conditions, evicted. Moving to fastest growing segment of homelessness is women with children. That's unconscionable in our country. Another fast growing segment of homelessness is aged people over 60 years of age. We have a serious housing problem and we have to address it. We cannot address all of the other social objectives we have, jobs, income, education, health, without a home, a place to live. So I applaud NHB for its work over all these years and these honorees who've been doing this work. But we have to focus on the problem of homelessness. It's down from 850,000 people a night to about 650,000 people a night, and we've made some progress. Some cities are now able to say they have turned the corner and ended veterans' homelessness, for example. But we have these other forms of homelessness that continue to grow. Critical problem. Affordability, we've talked about that. Home ownership, still an important goal for our country, as it has so much to do with the creation of a middle class. And oh, by the way, the connection between rental and affordable rental and the ability to eventually act upon the dream of home ownership is a close link. It matters. It's the hope for a future middle class, the backbone of our society, frequently depends upon people being able to build up some equity. And for most Americans, the sum total of their equity or net worth is the value that they have in a home. And then we have the need to connect programs like housing and health, and housing and education, and housing and job training, and so many others. And finally, I would say we have an impending crisis in the inadequacy of housing for the aging tsunami that our country is about to witness. An aging tsunami in which the number of people over 65 years of age will double. over the next several years, over the next 2 decades. And the number of people over 85 years of age will triple. And the housing that they're in today is simply not appropriate for an aging population. It's larger than they need. It's not accessorized properly. One of the big challenges we confront as a country. So as we think about the American future, both in traditional terms of greatness, but in other terms of decency and compassion and understanding the phases of life and the dynamics of life, we simply have to understand more clearly housing is the very base of it. I want to thank all of you who are here this evening to support NHP, many of you in the housing finance, housing construction, housing design, syndication, so many different aspects of the housing equation, but all committed to putting Americans into safe and decent housing. Thank you for your work. Thank you to NHP, and thank you to everyone associated with this effort.